The sun was sinking low over the Wyoming plains, casting long orange shadows across the endless expanse of grass and dust. The wind carried with it the smell of hay and rain, an almost tender fragrance for such a wild and unrelenting land. At the edge of a worn dirt road stood a young woman in a tattered coat, her hair tangled from miles of walking. Her name was Clara Bennett, and she had run out of everything: money, options, and hope. She clutched a faded backpack against her chest like it was the only thing holding her together. Inside it were a few clothes, a cracked photograph of her mother, and the last remnants of a dream she once had about becoming a nurse. But that was before her stepfather's fists, before the letters of rejection, before the nights spent in bus stations trying to sleep upright. Now she stood barefoot in the dust, staring at a ranch whose fences stretched farther than she could see. In the distance, a man was moving hay bales from the back of a pickup. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the ease of someone used to hard work. His name was Eli Carson, a rancher who had inherited the land from his parents and had spent most of his 40 years fixing fences, breaking horses, and burying dreams of a family he never had. Clara hesitated at the gate. She'd never asked for help from a stranger before, not like this. But she hadn't eaten properly in 2 days, and the bruises on her arm were still dark from where she'd been grabbed last. She could almost hear her mother's voice whispering, "Keep going, Clara. Someone will see you." With a shaky breath, she walked toward the barn. Eli glanced up when he saw her. There was something in her walk, uneven, like she was trying not to collapse, that caught his attention. He set the bale down and wiped his hands on his jeans. "You lost," he called out, his voice deep but gentle. Clara tried to speak but the words stuck in her throat. She hated this part, the explaining, the shame. I was wondering if you needed any help," she said finally. "I can work. I'll do anything." Eli studied her for a moment. Her clothes were thin, her shoes falling apart. She looked like someone who'd been through a storm and hadn't quite made it out. "You from around here?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, just passing through." Something in her tone tugged at him. "Come on inside," he said. "You look like you could use some water." The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and wood smoke. Clara sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a mug like it was a lifeline. Eli moved around the kitchen quietly, giving her space. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Well, Clara, you're welcome here for as long as you need to catch your breath." She looked at him then, truly looked. His face was lined from sun and wind, but his eyes were steady. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to her like that, with no judgment, no conditions. "I can't stay," she said quickly. I'll work for food. Please." Eli shook his head. "Food's not something you earn around here. You're welcome to a meal. After that, we'll see." Clara swallowed hard. "I'm not worth anything," she whispered. "I don't even know why I'm still trying." Eli paused, then walked over and sat across from her. "That's not true," he said simply. "I don't know what's happened to you, but I know this much: people aren't trash. You're worth more than you think." His words broke something open inside her. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. She turned her face away, ashamed. "Hey," he said softly. "You're safe here. Nobody's going to hurt you." That night, Eli gave her the spare room, the one he'd kept for years, hoping maybe a nephew or niece would visit but never did. Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the windows. She thought of the men she'd trusted, the jobs that had vanished, the nights she'd told herself she could keep going just one more day. She didn't believe Eli when he said she was worth something. Not yet, but there was a strange steadiness in his voice, like he wasn't just saying it to be kind. Over the next few days, Clara started helping in the barn. She mucked stalls, fed horses, and learned how to mend a fence. Eli didn't ask questions. He just showed her how to work, patient and steady. One afternoon, as they were repairing a section of wire, a sudden storm rolled in. The sky turned black, the wind howled, and a young colt panicked, breaking free of its pen and bolting toward the open range. Clara didn't think, she just ran. She caught up to the colt near the edge of a ravine, her hands shaking as she grabbed its halter and whispered softly to calm it. When Eli arrived on horseback moments later, he saw her standing there in the rain, holding the terrified animal. Something in the sight hit him hard. This girl who thought she was worth nothing, risking herself for a frightened creature. You're something else, Clara, he said quietly, helping her lead the colt back. She looked at him, rain dripping from her hair. I just didn't want it to get hurt. Neither did I, he replied. That night, over supper, Eli finally asked, where were you headed before you came here? Clara stared at her plate. Nowhere. Everywhere. I was going to find work in Billings. Maybe. You ever think about staying put? She gave a small laugh. No one's ever wanted me to. Eli leaned back in his chair. Maybe you've been looking in the wrong places. Weeks passed. Clara's cheeks began to lose their hollow look. She started humming while she worked, a soft tune her mother used to sing. Eli noticed but didn't comment. He knew what it was like to build yourself back piece by piece. One evening, he found her sitting on the porch steps, staring at the stars. You know, she said, I used to dream about being a nurse. Helping people. But everything just kept falling apart. Eli sat beside her. Dreams don't have expiration dates, he said. They just wait for you to come back to them. She smiled faintly. You really believe that? I do. The next morning, Clara found an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a letter Eli had written in a check. It was enough to pay for her first semester at the local community college. I can't take this, she said, her hands trembling. You can, he said. It's not charity. It's an investment, in someone who's worth it. Tears blurred her vision. Why would you do this for me? Because someone did it for me once, Eli said quietly. And because I've seen the way you are, with the horses, with the work. You're more than what happened to you, Clara. It took her a long time to answer. Finally, she whispered, I'm not worth anything. Eli reached across the table and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and steady. That's where you're wrong, he said. You're worth everything. For the first time in years, Clara believed it might be tea. Months later, Clara stood on the porch again, this time with a small stack of textbooks under her arm. She was enrolled in classes now, working part-time at the ranch and studying the rest of the week. She still had scars, inside and out, but she'd stopped hiding them. Eli came up beside her, wiping his hands on a rag. You ready for your first class tomorrow? She nodded. Nervous, but ready. He smiled. You're going to be great. She looked at him, her eyes bright. You know, when I first came here, I didn't think anyone could ever see me as more than a burden. I didn't, Eli said. I saw someone brave enough to walk through my gate when she had nowhere else to go. Clara laughed softly, the sound like wind through tall grass. Thank you, she said. For everything. You don't owe me thanks, he replied. Just promise me you'll keep believing in yourself. She squeezed his hand. I will. That night, Clara wrote in her journal for the first time in years. I'm not nothing. I'm not broken. I'm someone who survived. Someone who's learning to help others. She closed the book and looked out at the ranch. The fences stretched wide under the moonlight, but now they didn't seem like barriers. They felt like arms open wide, holding a space for her until she was ready to fly. And as the wind rustled the grass and the stars shimmered overhead, Clara whispered into the night, I'm not worth anything, but something new. I'm worth something. I'm worth everything.